Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Council Finance Committee meeting for January 26, 2026. It's not 6 p.m., it's 6:12. We're getting a late start. We had another council committee before, and that business just ended, and now we're starting this committee. I am Chair Jim Posh. I'm gonna call the roll. Councilmember Larson?
I'm here.
That's the two of us. We have a vacancy in our membership, but we have other council members present. We have Jessica Cohn, Craig Cobb, Tony Kuda, Joy DeWitt, Foy, Mayor Petrus has decided to join us. We have Finance Director Rashawn here. We have Tiffany and we have April, I believe on Zoom. We're still trying to figure out how to wig Zoom into this now that it's new for our charter and it's kind of fun. And just moving right ahead with our agenda, our first issue is just basically getting a finance committee department update. We got some financials today and you have a presentation, so.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be here to present to you this evening. So what I'll be walking through is a summary of the December 31st, 2025 financials. If we move right into page 2, just from a big picture standpoint, we had a really good year financially. Our revenues came in higher than budget. We had some robust capital spending due to ARPA funds, and that's good because we want to get those spent down before the end of 2026. And we also ended the year again with a healthy unencumbered cash balance, and we'll see that on this page and the pages to come. So we'll begin with the unencumbered fund balance report, and this is for all funds. We began the year with an all funds cash balance of $110 million, up from $109 million, which is a 1% increase year over year. Now this, of course, is a positive sign as the cash increased $1.3 million, showing stability in this area. Our revenues increased 15%, primarily driven by the year-end transfers. As you all are aware, we did some year-end transfers, and this is our customary practice to do transfers to fund our debt reserve, our debt requirements, our rainy day fund, to fund capital projects, to zero out any negative fund balances. And so we did do that, but when that goes out of the general fund, it's an expenditure, and when it comes into the other funds, it's recorded as a revenue. And so part of the revenue increase here is those funds coming back in. However, we did see actual revenues increase as well. So our property tax collections increased and our municipal income taxes also increased. Over on the expenditure side, we saw a rise of expenses of 36%, again, due to the transfers out. We did see our capital spending from ARPA funded related projects ramp up, as I mentioned, as we look to get that money spent down by the end of 2026. Year over year, we spent 11 million more in ARPA and 25 compared to 2024. So that spend down in ARPA related funds in 2025 reduced the open encumbrances and contributed to the unencumbered fund balance decline of 2.5%.
Question for you, Director. We're starting to see the year-end balance trending downward. Do you have, this is maybe unfair to ask, I'm sorry, a projection as to where this balance might be at the end of 26, with understanding that these ARPA funds are going to be going out even more?
So I don't have it for all funds in terms of the cash balances, what you're looking for. I don't have that here with me, but we did project a $20.2 million for the general fund. However, as we spoke, we'll get to that a little bit later. It's going to come in, it came in a little short at the top of the year.
Yeah.
However, we anticipate making that up over the course of the year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I guess what's really kind of scary is you do look at the 2022 amount and the encumbered balance, and it's kind of a polluted number because it does include $38 million worth of ARPA expenditures, and frankly, we were holding on to that money for such a long period of time, and it really wasn't being used.
But it built up interest for
But
us.
built up interest, which is great, but it wasn't being used for its purpose. And now we're starting to, find our way that it's not there. And I think the thing that we need to be most cautious about right now is we right-sized our payroll so we can be competitive. And now we have we have a higher payroll. And I'm sure the $133 million expenditure amount is that higher number. I mean, it's some of that's ARPA's, some of that's other things like the payroll. I think we're just going to have to keep a close look on that
Mhm.
and just try to see how it just all kind of equalizes. It's going to be challenging.
On page 3, we see an all funds revenue comparison, total revenue, if you look at the very bottom line. Total revenue for 2025 was $114 million, an increase of $15 million year over year. This increase was related to our municipal income taxes, which increased by $1.7 million, up 5% year over year. Our municipal income tax collections also exceeded our budget projection by about 1.3. So it exceeded on a year over year and also over an actual to budget basis. Property taxes also rose by $3.3 million, and that's up 26% due to the sexennial tax reassessment. This is in line with the countywide increases. Again, we did exceed our budget expectations in this area.
Do we get an unemployment rate or unemployment rate for Cleveland Heights, like just for Cleveland Heights? Does that ever?
I can look into that. I'm not aware of what that is.
I'd just be interested to see if the rate's down and the unemployment rate's down in Cleveland Heights and obviously the revenues are up. That would be an interesting cause and effect relationship and pretty obvious.
Just trying to figure it out. Yeah, so on the property tax revenue increase, is the 26% that we saw in the last, like by the end of 2025, what is the property tax revenue that we put into the 2026 budget? Like what was the increase and is that less or more than the 26%?
So it's in line with the 2025 actuals.
So it's trending.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And that was all of that property tax increase was essentially budgeted and as expected revenue. There's no sense that we're gonna get an additional kind of windfall from property tax.
I do believe, though, what we were told during the budgeting process, that the these are conservative.
Okay,
So generally, you really kind of expect that you're gonna see an increase than what was budgeted, because the budget numbers are conservative.
Mhm.
It's kind of a little bit of rainy day fund.
so then my follow-up question is for property tax revenue, is that limited in any way in terms of what we as the city can use it on for expenses, or is that just considered?
So it's actually divvied up into different funds. The largest share goes to the general fund and then you can use for,
Anything.
And then some of it goes towards the police pension, fire pension, I think the recreation improvement fund. And I'm gonna say some of it is related to debt. So there's a
Debt
portion.
service.
Yeah, debt service.
And the part that's in the general fund, when we have usable money in the general fund, can that also be allocated to capital or is that solely for operating?
So yes, we do allocate some of those funds towards capital as a transfer out.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Welcome. Okay.
That crazy okay button.
I know, it keeps popping up. And so then to your point, the other financing sources is exactly where we would transfer that out. Here we transferred in and we increased revenues year over year by $10.6 million. As I just mentioned, we do that to fund our debt requirements a rainy day fund, capital projects, et cetera, and zero out any negative fund balances that may exist. Our 2025 interest earnings decreased due to the spend down of ARPA money. And last but not least, just wanted to point out that all other revenue declined by 47%. Due to a reduction in confiscated funds and evidence funds by the police department and foreclosure bond funds by the planning department. Now, this category is kind of a catch-all category. It's not something that can be easily kind of forecasted because it's infrequent and, you never know what's gonna come in. It could be a one-time revenue, et cetera. And so, but it is down year over year.
Sorry, do you happen to know from the planning department if the reduction in foreclosure bond funds was happenstance or was related to a particular policy change?
I don't, I can check in.
I would appreciate it, yeah,
That'd be good to know.
for I'm thinking for
Yeah.
housing. And how much that was, I guess, of the 826,000, because if it's a little bit, then it's not such a big deal if it's,
We had trouble getting that foreclosure bond program going to begin with,
I
so
remember that.
I'd like to know if it's still being successful.
And so just to close out on this slide, for all of our major revenue categories, our 2025 actuals exceeded our expectations.
Yay.
That's good.
I know, that's good, right?
Positive.
Thank you very much, Director.
Absolutely. On page 4, this is a roll-up of our expenses. The first line item is personal services, which is our salaries and benefits. They are up $6.5 million or 13% compared to 2024. This is tied to increased personnel. We also saw increases in our contractually obligated wages in terms of in 24, I wanna say we had the police and fire contract up for renegotiation, and then last year we had the local 860. We also gave cost of living increases to our employees last year.
Are you negotiating any union contracts in 26?
No, the next is up 27, and I think that's the 24 to 27,
Okay, great.
is the police and fire.
And this might be a question for April, but do we have a parental leave program in the city?
I'm not sure.
Yes,
We do? Okay.
we do.
I'm sorry, I didn't fully hear the question.
April, I'm curious if we have a parental leave benefit for employees in the city.
I do believe that is something I can look more into.
Would you? I appreciate it as someone who's been
Yes,
on
no
5
problem.
maternity leaves. This is something that's important to me, and I think that if we're not already offering some sort of benefit, and if we are, then maybe it's time to look at that if we want to continue to be an employer of choice and attract young talent, et cetera, et cetera. So don't need to do it tomorrow, but
Sure.
it's on my list. Thank you, April.
Get that back to you. All right.
Okay.
Let's see, so for all of our major revenue categories, I did say the 2025 collections exceeded expectations. Okay, so we're now on the expenses, I apologize. The capital category increased by $14.5 million, 92% compared to 2024. I mentioned earlier that we had a ramp up of our spending for the ARPA-related capital projects. We also spent about $2 million more on resurfacing roads in 2025 over 2024. Our transfers out, which is considered an expense, increased by $11 million. And that's up 198% compared to 2024. In 2024, due to the loss of our interim finance director, we didn't transfer some of our, rainy day debt reserves, et cetera. We didn't make the same amount of transfers. So I think they only zeroed out the negative fund balances. And so that's why it's $11 million more this year. So we took care of those additional needs in 25.
Can I ask, when you actually took care of that, was it before or after our budget cycle?
It was after, I think we did that right around the time of the last council meeting. So a couple of days after that, we had to get approval from you all to get that done.
Good question.
Mhm.
On the 2025 budget percent used, we roughly 80% of the budget was used. What is the 20% that we didn't use of the budgeted amount? Would that be some capital expenditures that didn't get purchased or projected in 25? Is that because of, we know that, well, no, that's my question, is there something in there that 20% of the budget didn't get spent?
We're really, I'm sorry.
On page 4,
Okay.
Well, that's interesting because it says here that for 2025, the city spent or encumbered 94% of the amended budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
I'm sorry, did I move ahead? I'm sorry. They're all the same color, Director.
Oh, I see.
No, you're on the right.
In that second column.
So that's 79%. So I believe there, and I can take a look at this, Council Member Larson, I believe there is, so in our amended budget, what the system does, it includes encumbrances. So any rollovers, so it
Which
may
we
be-
had.
Right, it may be some encumbrances that were rolled over that we didn't spend down, and so, yeah, I believe that's what that is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's gonna be the last bubble of the COVID DARPA money. And also, we were understaffed too. So the amounts of monies that were, I mean, I believe maybe the last time I spoke to the police the police chief, we're still down 10%. And I think that's been sort of, if you just sort of look, if everybody's down 10%, that would make sense with the ARPA.
Thank you.
Sorry, Rashawn, I have a question on the capital expenses, and this is related to, I think we're expecting 2 snowplows next month. Were those expenses part of 2025? Or are those ones that were accounted for in this coming budget? Like how do we handle, like if delivery is coming in the next fiscal year?
Yeah, I would have to take a look at that. It depends on when it was encumbered, so I would have to take a look and see if it was a part of, I don't have the full capital list in front of me. But it depends on if it was something that they had already budgeted for and encumbered, then that would post against the 2025 expenses.
Okay.
So I can look at that and
Yeah,
let you know.
thank you.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the 2 snowplows that are coming this year?
That's, yes, in February. I imagine that was part of last year's purchases,
has to
but
be.
I just curious, I mean, it has to be, but
Yeah.
just in case.
That would probably be part of the bubble.
Yeah, right.
So now we'll turn our attention to the general fund, and as you all are well aware, the general fund is our largest fund. And so we'll see trends in the general fund similar to that of all funds. So an increase in municipal income taxes, et cetera, expenses are very similar. So to take a look at the cash balance for the general fund. The beginning cash balance increased from 24 to 25. This is due to the transfers out. I'm sorry, the transfers in. No, I'm looking at this wrong. Transfers. Okay, beginning cash balance increased from 24 to 25. Oh yes, so at the end of 24, we didn't make the transfer out to the extent that we did in 25, and so that's why it's
Bigger number.
yes, a bigger number, correct. Our revenue increased by 8%, primarily driven by year-end transfers, our property tax collections, and also municipal income tax increases. Our expenditures rose about 42%, largely due to the general fund transfer out and increased spending from ARPA funded projects, again, up $11 million year over year. As a result of that spend down, the unencumbered fund balance declined by roughly 37%. Any questions on that slide?
What do you attribute to the larger open encumbrance amount compared to, you know, 25 compared to 23 and 24.
So we did have an encumbrance come on late, and I will talk to this later. The revenue replacement, the ARPA revenue replacement. And so that was, I guess, approved in 24, but we didn't actually encumber those until 25. And so that's a large part of that.
Okay.
It does beg the question, which is what we talked about, that we want to be conservative on what we keep in that cash reserve in the unencumbered fund balance. And that we've dropped below what our target's been for at least the last year, 20 million, so just with a word of caution as we get approached for unbudgeted items that you will help us with, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Mayor and I had the discussion earlier just about, you know, kind of making sure we stay on track in terms of where we are with an as-is budget to the extent possible. And so that's what we're shooting for, unless there's some emergency or.
Well, but that's what that money's
Right,
for
right.
as well, something comes up that we didn't expect, but it's like, if that can be conveyed to your directors as well, be very helpful.
So we also have to have some consistency though in how we're reporting out. I mean, it's good that we've sort of adjusted back to do the transfers the way that they're supposed to happen. But we're gonna have to go through an audit for 2024, which is, it's gonna be interesting to sort of see. I mean, they're gonna see that we hadn't been doing that. I don't think we'll get dinged for it. I doubt we'll get dinged for it. But
That's
it's just,
gonna be done next month. We'll have 2024, am I wrong?
Well, the audit won't be complete next month, but yeah, the financials,
Right, I meant we'll have sent our
yes,
piece.
that's,
piece.
yes.
Well, I'll let you move on. This is very good information. So
Well, before you move on though, we don't have all of our revenues accounted for 2025, right? That's gonna be adjusted at some point.
So on the cash basis, yes, we have them accounted for. We closed the year out, and so we're solid there. Now, there will be some accruals that will go back into 2025. So just an accounting practice, you accrue for your expenses and revenues, things that maybe were paid out and that were earned for 2025 that weren't received or paid out into the next year. And so that will be backdated. But on the cash basis, yes, we're closed out.
So does that mean that we could have more than 17 point, I'm sorry. Yeah, we could have more than that in,
Well, we could, but typically the accruals are relatively, for the most part, they're gonna be consistent year over year. So, you know, you have an accrual rolling off and you have an accrual rolling on,
Yeah.
so those are gonna be pretty close. So you won't see too much of a variance, but yeah, it should be pretty close to the 17,
Okay.
to that final number.
I reached out to Director Clinkscale and regarding the two plows, and one was encumbered in 2024 and the other was encumbered in 2025. We'll pay for them after receiving them.
Okay.
We've had one plow on order for 2 years.
That's what she shared.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. This little pop-up driving me insane.
very convenient.
Okay, let's see. So I think we left off on the expenditures, let's see where we at. Page 6, correct?
Yep.
So then I mentioned the revenue increase of 8% primarily by the year transfers. I mentioned the property tax collections and also the municipal tax increases. Our expenses rose, we went through that. And the unencumbered fund balance declined by 37% as a result of the spend down in the ARPA funds. On page 7, let's flip there. So this is the total 2025 general fund revenues for the general fund, as I mentioned. That was at $63.7 million, an increase of $4.8 million, up 8% compared to 2024. Again, like our all funds category, municipal tax increased by $1.7 million year over year. Property taxes rose to $0.7 million, and we recorded more in intergovernmental grants and contracts by about $1 million, so that's an increase up from 2024. And in terms of actuals to budget, the 2025 general fund revenues exceeded its budget by 9%.
Is there a rule of thumb? I know property taxes, we get 10%, is it 10%?
Of every dollar,
Yeah,
I think that's like 16% or so.
oh, is it that much?
Yeah, from what I could see, yeah.
So is there a rule of thumb on like, how much, like if it goes up a certain percent, what it is, what that means to us in dollars? Like if the revenue from property taxes goes up, 5%, what does that mean for the city?
So for every dollar that it goes up, 16% would roughly be returned to the city. And then you have the.
Right, okay, I mean,
Is that what you're,
yeah,
okay,
so it'd be 16%, I thought it was less, thank you.
yeah. So the next slide reflects the 5-year history of our municipal income taxes. As you can see, with the exception of 22 to 23, our municipal income taxes have risen steadily around $2 to $3 million annually. And this is for a couple reasons. As the wages go up, of course, we're gonna get back more in taxes. The other reason for this is as we see an increase in remote workers, that 1% tax credit is being collected as revenue. And so those two factors are the drivers behind the year over year increase. And then this is the final financial slide, and it's a general fund expenditures comparison. The general fund personal services increased $8.3 million or 25% compared to 2024. Again, we increased our personnel, contractually obligated wage increases, hospitalization increases, and also workers' comp expenses increased. Now, this impacted our unencumbered fund balance, and it is part of the reason for the $2.2 million discrepancy or shortfall. We had 2 workers' comp payments that went out in 2025. One was late, so these are due in advance. One we paid at the top of the year, which was due for the previous year, and then we also had to make another payment at the end of the year that we didn't account for, roughly $600,000 for 2026. And so that's part of the reason for that shortfall in the projection.
But you got that back on schedule now though, right?
Yes, it's back on schedule now. Yes. So we're back, we're good with that. Our other than personnel services increased by $1.6 million. And this is from increased economic development expenses, outside maintenance expenses, and material, tools and supplies and utility costs. General fund.
I'm sorry, we had increased utility costs. I thought we had just had that huge contract with Leopardo to reduce our utility. Can we nail down what that came from and how much of the 1.6 million that is?
And I think we need to compare that with whatever the contract is. Contractual agreement with Leopardo. And
So the city engaged a company named Energility to count the savings. And so we've had a couple helpful meetings with them, and they are doing a site visit next week so that they can inspect the work that was done and so that they can provide their own assessment on the savings.
Will they also do that sort of calculation? Did we contract with them to help us understand the output, I guess, of
They're going to monitor our energy savings. Director Hannah and I were going to have a meeting today with Leopardo's leadership, and we decided to reschedule that for the end of next week so that Energility would have a chance to complete their walkthrough and provide an overview to us of their findings.
and how, I guess back to Director Rashawn, we're obviously paying debt service on the contract, but if the savings, the way the contract is structured, if we're paying more for utilities than we are supposed to, we're supposed to recoup that savings from Leopardo. How will that where does that show up? Will that show up as a general fund
And
revenue
then
item?
in the increased utility costs or in,
No, if Leopardo has to reimburse us.
oh,
because-
okay.
Does that, yeah, so
So, yes, because we funded the debt through the general fund. And so then that should, if we are returning some funds, then we should be able to reimburse the general fund.
I would wonder what the expectation for the timeline is on that though, cause
I
they
agree.
just built, they modified those facilities, some of them, just during the year last year in 25. So I'd be curious when the contract says it kicks in, that's their responsibility to pay us back if we go over, if our utilities increase especially. So I think there's some timing issues with the contract that this
Yeah.
company that the mayor has spoken about that we've hired should be able to see that as well, right?
Yeah, I think maybe what we wanna consider is once everything just sort of like levels out a little bit, we
Yeah.
probably need to have a meeting with the administration and finance to sort of get an understanding of the impact of that contract.
Yeah.
Because I believe we hired Energility for the whole purpose of helping us better understand what we need to get into. And we've already sort of heard that some of the things we were told when we were paying the deal may have not been accurate, so I think we really need to figure out that. And I'm not making accusations against anybody at this point, but it seems like it's a different day. So I think we need to sort of figure that out, but I know you're working on it, and I think once you figure stuff out, we probably should have a meeting about it.
Yes.
And last but not least, for 2025, the general fund spent or encumbered 94% of its amended budget. And so that is the final financial slide, and I know you all had some other questions, Councilman Kosh, that you,
I'm checking with
Address.
Joe because I can't see him on the screen, nor can I see if he has a hand up. Nothing yet. I think he's off screen. It's okay. I just got it.
No
I just-
questions for me, thanks.
Oh, great. Thank you. So we're closed. We have current financials. We talked a moment ago about the audit status. Just give us an update on that if you can.
so yes, I did reach out to the state of Ohio, the auditor's office. And what I was told is that it has moved, so previously the report out was that it hadn't even been submitted for review because they were so backed up. And so it has moved from that status to it's currently under review. And so they're reviewing it. They're gonna go, if they have any questions for our auditor for Zupka, they'll reach out to them, but they weren't able to give me an ETA, but it is under review. And so as soon as that's wrapped up, they finalize everything, it should be uploaded to the website.
So the state basically assigns an accounting firm to do this work for us. And it's actually 2 accounting firms, but this is the final one. Zupka has already given something to the state, which was months ago.
Yes.
And then the state has to review that work in order to put their stamp of
Correct, and
approval on it.
they were behind, they had a ton of audits, and so they were just backlogged. From September, we submitted that back, Zupka submitted that back in September 30th, and so they're just now getting around to reviewing our information.
And this is 2023,
2023,
which you would normally get that back in October or so in 2024.
Correct, yeah,
So we're-
September, October.
And I know there's been a lot of fixing that has been going on. We still have 2024, which we're hopeful that we're gonna get a response back sooner than.
Right, yeah, I mean, in terms of the audit itself, I mean, that should be like a 3 to 4 month process. So we're looking at if we get the financials complete by the end of February, May, June-ish in terms of an audit. And then from the state's perspective, I can't really speak to, how soon they'll be able to review that, but in terms of the audit being complete, we should have it wrapped up before May or June.
Nice presentation. Good
Okay.
job.
Thank you so
And-
much.
And understand the teams here that helped, so it's great. Thank you, everybody.
May I add, thank you for getting us all this information at this point in the year.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that will give you a calendar reference so you can start to, the financial reports might come to us on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
That would be fabulous if you can do that, Director Caldwell.
Absolutely, that's.
Been asking for it for 4 years, so be part of my heart if you can do that.
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of, we moved from, sporadic kind of report outs
Yes.
to now monthly. It's just in terms of now we just want to get those out a little bit quicker, is what we're looking forward to.
And then will you be posting them on the website whenever they get produced? Like, will this be on the website?
So yes, Tiffany usually sends those out. We sent it to you all first and we'll just go ahead and send it to Steve to get uploaded.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you will.
Any other questions or thoughts for the finance committee, finance department update? Moving on to our
I
next.
do have a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Joe.
I'm able. Director Caldwell, you referenced that some of the increase in the municipal income revenue, you attributed it to, working from home and that we're not giving that 1% credit for some of those employees. If you were able to share any data on that and other potential increases or causes for that increase, so whether that's an increase in median income if we're seeing, or if we are seeing an increase in actual employment,
Okay.
any of that data would be very interesting to see.
Okay, I can work with Rita. They perform the analysis in terms of the remote workers. I know Progressive was one of the large employers for some of our residents, and so when they kind of shifted to remote work, that was one of the things that they found. So, but the other data, I can certainly work with them to pull
Okay,
that
thank you.
information
Appreciate
on.
it.
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the next item. Looking for an administrative update from essentially your department perspective of the legislative reporting requirement for contracts that need to be reported out that exceed $7,500. And I know this is sort of a team effort. It involves you and it involves law, but it'd be great to get an update on that from the perspective of your department and how we're gonna follow through adhering to the requirements of that legislation.
Sure.
Would it be helpful if I took this? So we actually had a meeting today about this because we recognize that this is still outstanding and something that we need to work on. It was initially understood that when the request came in, that it was a public records request. And that was not true. This was something that was instigated by legislation. And so a lot of data was provided and the communications department was trying to sort through it and understand, like, okay, what are we supposed to do with this when their job was really just to post it on the website? And in starting to look through it, they found that some of the contracts didn't have everything they needed. And so they started reaching out to different departments, and then they ended up being the point people who were trying to figure this out. And it was not efficient. And so what we decided is that we're going to have a weekly recurring meeting so that we can both come up with a process for how we can more efficiently make sure that we get all the pieces, but then also start chipping away at this so that we need to do these things simultaneously. Otherwise, we're just going to get more and more behind. So our first recurring meeting is later this week. This is going to be a cross-departmental effort. But that is what we discussed today, and if there's anything else in addition.
Yes, and so the other piece to that is what we found, to the mayor's point, is that we have to implement some type of tracking system, because from my experience, what happens is that finance sometimes receives, and we're made aware of like the contract when there is a PO attached in the system or there's an FOC required. We don't necessarily get the fully executed contract, and so that's something that I did discuss with Director Shantz in terms of maybe using Monday.com to automate and track the contracts at the point that they're submitted to law for review through, the FOC certification by the finance director, as well as through the signature by the mayor. And so we can also create alerts for the 7,500s on those contracts that meet the 7,500 up to the $50,000 range, so that they're made aware as well, okay, these need our attention. And so everyone is kind of made aware and kept in the loop on this tracking of various contracts, yes.
Before they're approved for posting, is the law department doing a review in case something needs to be redacted for a legal purpose?
That was part of the discussion today, that needs to be a part of the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was gonna say, because not everything.
Okay, so the scope of the legislation, I don't have it here in front of me. I mean, can it just be simple as a list?
I think that's what we intend to put on the website, and that's from what Steve has already put up there, it's a very nice, clean list. But in reviewing individual contracts, we've realized that there were a lot of outstanding pieces, as the director mentioned, and so
I see, okay.
we want to create a process so that going forward, we don't have missing pieces, so that whenever something is passed over to the communications department, they have everything and they don't need to then reach out to different departments saying, hey, this piece isn't there, that piece isn't there. So we need to simultaneously create that process and also put more on the website.
So is staff trying to do this as of a particular effective date? So, I mean, this goes back a number of months.
Yeah.
If it wasn't done.
June of 25.
Thank you, June of 2025. I mean, if you just all of a sudden put a stick in the sand and say, okay, well, as of March 1st, it's all gonna be accurate, and then sort of work your way backwards if you have to play catch up.
Yeah, I mean, that could certainly, be one approach, and so we don't wanna get further behind. We are already behind with 2026. And so, we need to work on a process here.
And I do have an update, Mayor. So over the past week leading up to this meeting, I did have John Reve started. So he did pull all contracts as of, I think, November, like mid-November, dating back to the effective date. And so then I had him go back and take a look at, anything that had come in after that. The problem we ran into, as the mayor mentioned, is that all of those contracts have not been posted to the website. I think there's a handful, there are some out there, because it's missing information. And so to the mayor's point, we're gonna meet and figure out how we wanna handle those items. Do we, want to upload them as is? I mean, what does that look like? And so, yes, we did do one tranche through November, and John Reve is working on the second to get caught up to date.
I might add too that Addie and I are working with Civic Plus to see see what they could set up. Right, Addie?
Yes, yeah, I've actually was gonna jump in here too, but you go right ahead, Dale.
Okay, I would like to make a comment and then I'll let you speak. This to me is good, because if there are missing pieces, then this is the time to pull those missing pieces together so they're all in one folder or one location. So I'm impressed that you're tackling this, Mayor Petrus. I really, really am. Go ahead, Addie.
Well, I didn't wanna jump on any toes here, but I have talked with several other clerks in several other communities to see what they kind of do in terms of not just on the back end of posting for the public, but kind of what their process looks like, what softwares they use, if they use any. And I'd be happy to share that information with you, Kim. And
Okay, great, thank you.
so.
Thanks.
So I don't, this was, whose legislation was this?
Davidas.
Davina's, okay. So I can't ask, it's just contracts, it's not expenditures, right? I know everything goes through the finance department regardless, but it is not expenditures. So, you know, let's see what happens when this gets up and running, because I don't want to add anything, but you know, since there were credit card expenditures that exceeded $7,500 and we don't have a credit card policy, I know we'll have one, and I know you want to do that. But, you know, it just seems to me that we want expenditures, you know. I mean, if the idea is transparency, I don't think it should be limited to contracts, but
Well, I think it is all about transparency, and I believe at the time there was trust issues that were going on. And I think this is a first step of many that probably need to deploy. And I think we're a little shocked it's taken this long to get all this work done, but
It is.
yeah, it is what it is, and I really don't wanna throw any. I wanna move forward, I don't wanna look back at this point, okay? So instead of looking at the last 4 years, let's not do that, let's move forward. Any other items, any other discussion for this $7,500 piece? So we have two other agenda items, at 6:58, I know the prior meeting ran a little long. I don't think we have members of the Public Safety Committee here. Can I suggest that we try to discuss item number 4 and then carry over our committee priority discussion for next month's meeting? It seems like this discussion for a policy of funding requests is kind of a big deal. We have a significant number of council members and the mayor in this room. I think that's probably a good idea to at least have some initial conversations about it. Does anybody need an update on why we're talking about this? Or should I just give it in the form of transparency? We've had a number of individuals and organizations reach out to council looking for funding requests that are sort of outside a normal scope of services. Some of them are grants that we've given, some of them are things like, well, we would like to see if someone wants to sponsor something. And we've had some bigger ones come to us. So I think there was some concern about, okay, well, really, how do we handle this? Because we're really not an open checkbook. I mean, how do we grade these and manage them, and do we put a process in place? So just start there.
well, I'll let the committee talk first.
It doesn't, I think we're all in this together. I don't think there's, the lines between committees are blurred at this point.
To me, there are events that the city will be, you know, like co-sponsoring that maybe we would want to happen even if they weren't sponsored by an organization. I'm only gonna use the Music Hop as an example. I think it's a great thing for businesses and, you know, for our community as well. And when there's something that we think, you know, like we have money that we put into events. And if it's an event that, you know, we are a partner in, I see that as a justified expenditure, you know, because it has a public purpose and a, you know, help stimulate our local economy and that kind of a thing. So I think that's, you know, one of the criteria for this, you know, without something connected to public events, I think you're looking at something completely different, you know, and I don't know where we'd be on that, but to me, it could be part of the events budget. And we just say, hey, you know, we're going to co-sponsor these events because we believe in, and I think we need to collectively come up with, you know, I don't know, 4 or 5, like it's gotta be this, it's gotta be this, it's gotta be this. And that way we'll know, we'll have the same rubric that we'll use for plugging in events. When it comes to other things, I mean, I'd certainly listen, but that would be one. The other The other thing is that I know that the Music Hop in particular, they're looking for an answer from us out, they're starting in May with some of their events. So there's some things that have a little more urgency than others. I know that's not about the general framework, but it is something to look at as far as the timeliness of our decisions.
Might I add, though, they're asking for $30,000 for a staff member. That's what the proposal is, that they want to bring somebody on to pay them to run the events. So that's different than what we've done in terms of giving them money in the past.
That's correct. And I said, what I just said, that's what I believe, that it should be when we're promoting, I don't, that staff member thing, that's outside of what I'm talking about. So,
Thank
I
you.
mean, and
No,
we
I
can
wanted-
certainly talk about that. To me, that would be a separate issue. And I mean, paying for an ongoing staff member thing, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm not for that.
Well, it all depends what the ask is. I mean, if they give us a complete budget and they don't want us to fill a hole of 30,000 to necessarily pay for that staff member. It also goes toward bands. I mean, it's a collective. I mean, we could specify the use of those funds are for X, and it could be for programming as opposed to staff. I mean, we could do that. Just throwing that out there, so.
I wanna back up a little bit because I don't want us to lose the core, like, any public funds that are expended have to be for a public purpose. And there are different ways that we get at a public purpose, and there are different ways, I just wrote down, I see this as kind of like 4 buckets, right? We give out money to nonprofits from the CDBG funds, which we just were presented on. That is a significant amount of money, and that is used by nonprofits for their operating expenses, for programs, et cetera, of course, within the rubric of the federal guidelines, but that is a big chunk of money that the city puts forward specifically to nonprofits, and we could do less. It's only, my understanding is the CDBG funds, that's a maximum. We could always put money more into the city than nonprofits, but we've traditionally made a decision to put the maximum percentage towards nonprofits. And then President Kuda, I completely agree, where I think, we have events that the city runs, with which Director Shantz noted that there is a fund right now of $150,000 that the communications department, I believe, is managing, that is for city-run events like Fall Fest or the Martin Luther King event that was postponed for tomorrow, or things like that. And then there are third-party events, which many of them, I just want to say also, we know are going to happen. They're the Happy 5K, the Tiger 5K, Juneteenth, Pride, like these are ones that happen every year. And then there are the programs. And I feel like it is important for us to establish that the city is not a grant maker. We cannot provide money for specific people in terms of like a GoFundMe situation or something like that. We cannot provide, and when we have limited resources, nor do I think we could be a open grant maker with some sort of application for programmatic funds. And I feel pretty strongly about that, because if it's a choice for me between spending $100,000 for a nonprofit program versus a snowplow, for me, it's going to be a snowplow every single time, because that is our core mission here, is to provide city services. So I just, as a level setting, I think that if we have to figure out what that writ large policy is and where our boundaries are in terms of what we are willing and willing not to fund.
Councilwoman Cohen, can I ask a clarifying question on, I guess bucket 4 would be programs, and I didn't quite follow what those programs are.
I mean, I think that's nonprofits asking us for programmatic funds outside of the CDBG process that's already in place. And I'll 2 examples. One would be technically the proposal from Future Heights that they came to us. And 2, even though Cleveland Heights for Immigrants' Rights is not a nonprofit, that type of request, I'm not sure where they're asking the money to be directed to, but that type of kind of open request that we give X amount of money towards a programmatic need. And I apologize, I'm just used from my experience in philanthropy, like programmatic, sponsorship, all of these are, you know, terms that are used pretty,
Yeah, as opposed to say
Specifically.
personnel,
right.
right, yeah, I mean, that's where you,
Got it, understood, thanks.
Yeah, I almost think that there's a little bit of a difference there because when you look at like the music hop, I mean, if it's being used to pay for bands, for example, you know, that is for anybody that's showing up at the music hop. It's just it's a citywide piece. Whereas if we're giving money to, I'm gonna use a good cause here, Lake Erie Inc. You know, Lake Erie Inc. is using that programming money for a very, very select internal purpose to provide, to extend the programming that they're doing.
And I just think in the terms of grant making and nonprofit funding, there's a difference between sponsorship and programmatic funding. I'm saying I don't think we want to be in the space of general operating funds for nonprofits outside of CDBG for specific programs that aren't specifically event sponsorships, where it's we, the city, are partnering as a co-sponsor on Music Hop. And we stipulate, to your point, where those funds go.
I mean, isn't that a good criteria to build it on is co-sponsorship? We've got events that we've been doing for how many years now? That are community events that a lot of people come and enjoy. And the city gets the credit for being one of the sponsors for that event. I'm happy with that. Our dollar amounts have been what? 10,000, maybe 15 last year,
well, for what?
max. 10,
For what event?
well, what did we do for the music hop last year?
7,500, and the reason it went from 5,000 to 7,500 was they added a night. So we actually came up with, and from working with them, I had seen their budget, so I can speak on this in specifics. The $2,500 that we supplemented for each event. So again, it was 2 nights and then they expanded it to 3. When I looked at the total budget, I saw an actual shortfall that we could fill with that money. So when they added the other event, I actually knew what it cost to put on and that we could be here and that we could also, we do in kind in a sense that we put stuff in the e-newsletter and we get people that actually put some human, person hours into, the promotional stuff, writing stuff up and so forth. And the advertisement, we're paying employees to put stuff on Facebook and social media. That, I think that's a good role for us, because, again, public benefit,
Supported by a budget, that made sense.
helping our business districts.
So one of the things though is you have the music hop and just I hope we're not picking on them, just using them as an example, but it's probably a good one because it's one of the recent ones and it's a small dollar one that we have funded in the past. They're expanding from 3 locations to 6. Am I right? Is that the right? Is that the number?
Yeah, it might be 6.
They wanted to be in all our business districts.
Do we have, backing up even more, I know we have the $150,000 budget line item for city run events. In the budget process last year, from what I watched but did not participate in, wasn't there a line item that was being created either under council or community relations? And
No.
was that ever instituted?
No, we did not, it's not in council as for the budget
Okay.
hearings. And I'm pretty sure there's no specific line item, but Director Caldwell, if you could check on that for us, for council authorized events or whatever it would have been called. The lump sum that we heard last week from Jessica Shantz is 160 is sitting there for,
It's in the Parks and Rec budget, is it not?
for Parks and Rec. So that's where any money would come from. And we need to know what is committed of that 160 so that we have, if we're going to reauthorize these events that we've been asked for, we need to know what's been committed already.
Right, it might be a question if we don't have any money available, which would be a shame because we know Tiger 5K, the Happy 5K, the We Are Noble weekend, the Pride and Juneteenth, there are events, but are those part of the 150 or is there supposed to be something else? So I'm
But
not
what
sure
I
if
hear
that's
you
something-
saying is we need a set of principles that we agree on. And that's what would qualify. That doesn't mean you get the money.
Right.
That means that if you meet this, we'll consider it.
And I think it's
And-
important
and then
for the
we need a
public,
budget.
right? And then we need both simultaneously, I
Yes.
think, because if there's no budget, then this is a
Well, yeah.
non-issue until we go through the budgeting process in the fall.
Jeff, this could be a lengthy conversation. Is this something that should be looked at by our Community Relations Committee? Is that,
That's parks and, is it community relations and
Parks and Rec.
recreation?
Mr.
that's
DeWitt
Joe.
Foy.
Joe's raising his hand.
and then get together with the city staff to get some idea of what's on the calendar
That's great.
and what the expenses are. I think particularly in light of the finance discussion we've had tonight, that we sort of opened the spigot the last few years with the ARPA dollars, and we cannot afford to continue down that path with large expenditures. There was one in particular that I won't mention that we gave last year that really was probably, it wasn't a big benefit to the city, and it wasn't an event. And I just think we need to make sure that we're not doing that going forward if a council member comes, and it may be a great cause, but we don't have $100,000 to be giving to any particular organization anymore.
Joe?
So to clarify, that $150,000, are we intending that whatever requests come to council would come out of that? Because in previous years, that's not been the case. My understanding is we have, passed an amendment to the budget in order to add, the 5,000 or 10,000 to the budget. So are we thinking of that different this year?
We took it out of council funds though,
We
in the
did,
past.
but I think what we're trying to, in my opinion, what we're trying to do is actually establish a policy and maybe we'll work it into the budget, not maybe, that's what we absolutely should do. Is, we're gonna say, this is the criteria, we wanna put, 25,000, I'm just saying, whatever that amount is, and that would be in that Parks and Rec budget. But it would be spoken for, we're gonna do these, 5 events, we're gonna co-sponsor these 5 events with this money, and it meets these 4 or 5 bullet pointed criteria that we city council agree on, and hopefully the mayor, we want mayor and the administration to buy into that these are
But
because
So to follow up on that, is there a reason, so other than the fact that these requests come typically during the year after we have done the budget, is there a reason that this would need to be a council approval mid-year? And it wouldn't just be budgeted and then an administrative approval or allocation like
Sure.
every other part of the budget?
I think this year it would need, it would be, we didn't budget for it, so we would
But
probably.
we did talk about it though, when we were in the budget hearings, and that's our request for these events that we've been contributing to was going to be included in the Parks and Rec event
Well,
fund.
I mean, we'd have to break that down because I don't know
What is
that.
that?
I made a note here, so I'll go back, I'll get
Yes.
some updates and I can share them with Joe if he'd like to have a committee meeting or
That'd be
share them with
helpful.
everyone
Thank you.
so that we have some insight, because honestly, at the moment, I don't remember either, so it'd be helpful for
Can I
everyone.
also just jump in here real quick? I'm pretty sure that council does have, and Rashawn, if you wanna write this down and confirm later, I believe there is $20,000 in a discretionary fund under council's budget in budget fund number 2036.
that's what
I believe. So there is something there for council to do. I think we wanted to set that aside and then come back to the discussion later of whether or not we put it into the administration's budget somewhere in the future.
That sounds familiar. I'll take a look at it and confirm that.
And
That
that's-
sounds familiar.
And that's what I was referring to when I asked if there's something under.
I think Addie's right. I think we did that because we didn't really come to we didn't have this discussion yet at that point.
Okay, so just let me just feel out the room here a little bit. So not whether, I don't think we're making a decision, but I get the sense that there's really not an appetite to put an application on the website that says, fill out this application and we'll look at your application if we wanna fund it or not. We don't really look at that as single nose shaking their heads. It's not something we wanna do. Okay, well, I think that sort of walks us down another path, which is really, okay, so when we do get a request from someone that is not part of a formal process, you know, how we do need to have some kind of rubric of some sort. And I think Jessica, you mentioned there's really two paths to that. There's more of a sponsorship and there is more of like a grant, and we probably wanna put some language together on what we feel like that looks like. And we wanna, and if it's sponsorship, we're the Community Relations Council Committee probably should take that on.
Well, there's sponsorship and co-sponsorship. I mean, we sponsor the
Fall Fest?
yeah, but we're co-sponsors with, Music Hop.
So maybe we should call it a co-sponsorship as
Because
opposed to
they're
sponsorship.
really, because the
And that's why finding out how much money we have for this year is important.
Pride
And then
Festival,
thinking about what we wanna do for next year, I think is the B to the A. Cause we may wanna do something next year that is potentially a little bit more money, or this might work out just fine depending on how many events we're looking to co-sponsor or need to co-sponsor.
So part of this is also, I think, what we budget and what we don't budget. Okay, so if we're continually co-sponsoring something, we should probably earmark those funds. Have a budget. I don't know, I'm not sure it should be a council item, but it probably should go into the communications department if it's a co-sponsor.
Or the community relations. I
Well-
mean, we have events that we know are happening every year. For the schools, all these things. And so if that's where you're going, then I agree, like we should tally those up. What have we done in the past? What do we wanna continue
well,
to do?
I think we need to draft something, all events co-sponsored by city must have a bullet point. And then we see what we've done in the past, does that meet that?
I'm happy to take that on as a
Criteria.
first.
And then
draft.
we say, here's how much we wanna put towards that. And then we both have a public when I say a public purpose, I know that's actually one of the bullet points, but I mean, we have a set of criteria, and then, we don't have to, it's kind of a do's and don'ts, cause if it does, at least, now, that doesn't mean that some organization might not come up with something that meets all that, but we're not sponsoring it, co-sponsoring it now. We'll take a look at it, we might wanna figure that into the budget, but I think we have to do that first.
Well, I also think we need to talk to our law director too, because there's a certain sense of precedent. So if we do give $100,000 for something and someone comes to us and says, well, we need $100,000 and we reject that, I just wanna see what kind of liability.
Well, probably having a policy in that sense is even more important because now we have a clear date by which we've started this as our,
Okay.
I don't know. Can I ask just process wise, I'm happy to take on a first draft, but I presume that we'll have to look at it in committee. So could maybe I'll have that planned for whenever the Parks and Rec or the Community Relations and Recreation Committee is gonna have the financial information so we can do everything at once? Is that,
Is today Monday?
yes.
So I think like by Wednesday, we should be able to like talk internally and figure out how much of it's accounted for. Whether, I honestly can't even remember if like if like the Happy 5K, if we budgeted money for that, or if that was something that we decided, oh, we'll handle that one-off like we did previously. So I'll look at this tomorrow and then get you an answer by Wednesday.
And I think Joe, Councilman DeWitt Foy, you don't have a Parks and Rec meeting or Community Relations and Recreation meeting till the 9th, right? So we have, so that's,
Thank you for.
I can read this.
Okay, so we have a couple open items that will be old business. We will look at this from the finance committee perspective after we hear what happens in the communication. The community relations department, so this will be an ongoing item we'll have on our agenda for next month.
I knew it was gonna be a joint committee effort.
Right. I would like to adjourn this meeting if that's okay, so we can move on to the safety and health meeting. And maybe give us like a 5-minute break before we commence that. We okay with that? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your department being here. Nice
you,
job with
Director.
everything.
Bye, guys.
Okay, okay, this meeting is adjourned.